Hello, beautiful sacred souls. Today we're going to explore the sacred role of the ego, why healing integration, not transcendence. Today I want to explore a topic that lives right at the intersection of spirituality, psychology, and neuroscience, and that is the value of a healthy ego versus killing the ego. Many spiritual teachings teach us to rise above the ego, dissolve the ego, kill the ego. And I'm going to explore why it is important not to eliminate, transcend, or get rid of it, but it is something to heal, integrate, and mature. So this conversation is especially important because so many spiritual teachings encourage us to dissolve the ego, to rise above it, or bypass it in pursuit of enlightenment or awakening. And while there is beauty and truth in those teachings, they can also unintentionally cause harm when they are not guided in grounded trauma awareness or nervous system science or psychological development. Today, I want to offer a more integrated, compassionate, and embodied perspective. What do we mean by the ego? First, let's redefine what we mean when we say the ego. In psychology and neuroscience, the ego is not the enemy. The ego is actually the organizing center of our personality. It is what allows us to form an identity, develop boundaries, regulate emotions, create meaning, navigate relationships, and most importantly, function in the world. A healthy ego allows us to know who we are, what we feel, what we need, what we value, and how to protect ourselves. Without an ego, we cannot function as human beings. So the issue isn't the existence of the ego. The issue is if the ego is wounded and we're experiencing ourselves through a wounded ego. And most ego wounding comes from early childhood experiences, attachment injuries, trauma, neglect, or emotional invalidation. And that can happen in adulthood if we had a relatively secure childhood. So, why spiritual teachings often misunderstand ego? Many spiritual teachings developed before we had a modern understanding of trauma, of psychology, and the nervous system. So, suffering was often interpreted as ego, illusion, ignorance, spiritual immaturity, or lack of presence. This can feel deeply shaming or moralistically like there's something wrong with us versus there's nothing wrong with us. We've biologically adapted and now we just have to heal and integrate because neuroscience shows us that suffering is actually nervous system deregulation and protective mechanisms that we've developed. It's trauma that is stored in the body and the brain. It's attachment injury. It's survival responses. It's emotional memory. So when spiritual teachings tell people to just drop the ego or just be present or just surrender, trauma survivors or individuals that don't have a secure ego often hear, there's something wrong with me. I'm failing spiritually. I should be able to transcend this. This can create deep shame, self-blame, and spiritual bypassing. And it is important to note that patterns don't change just by trying to dissolve the ego or kill the ego. Those patterns still remain as protective mechanisms. And no matter how much presence you have, there will always come a time when triggers bring those to the surface. So healing is essential. From a neuroscience perspective, let's explore why ego is developmentally necessary. From a neuroscience perspective, the ego develops as part of our brain maturation. Our prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for self-awareness, emotion regulation, decision-making, empathy, and integration, does not fully develop until our mid to late 20s. And if we had trauma, it may not have developed in a healthy way. This means that ego development is a biological and neurological process, not a spiritual problem or flaw. A healthy ego, or being able to be present or in our divine nature, is required for self-reflection, emotional regulation, ethical behavior, healthy relationships, and spiritual discernment. Without a stable ego structure, spiritual practices can actually destabilize the nervous system rather than heal it. I unfortunately experienced this in 2008. I started experimenting with the power of now and meditation, and these practices led to a deep awakening. But because I didn't have a healed ego, it actually led to fragmentation, and it led to a diagnosis of schizophrenia and bipolar, which is schizoaffective disorder. And I have spent the last 18 years to heal my ego so that it is a cohesive, healed presence, which actually decreased that destabilization that I experienced when I tried to dissolve my ego. I'm an example of why a stable ego structure is important. From an IFS and parts work, ego is a protector. It is not the enemy. If you haven't heard about internal family systems theory, I encourage you to watch more of my videos or read some books by Richard Schwartz, because it is the idea that we have parts and that we also have a self. And self is the healed aspect of ourselves, and parts are the parts that hold wounding. From an IFS perspective, the ego is actually understood as our protective parts trying to keep us safe. These parts actually developed for good reasons. They actually learned how to protect us, how to adapt, how to survive, and how to manage emotional pain. They hold extreme wisdom and extreme intelligence. They did what was possible in the moment, given the level of skill or body awareness or age development that the person had when they encountered the trauma. When we spiritually attack the ego or try to kill it, we are actually attacking a part of ourselves. We are trying to kill protectors that have kept us safe, which actually increases fear and resistance and internal conflict. Healing doesn't happen by eliminating parts of ourselves or by eliminating protectors. It actually happens by listening to them, understanding them, and creating safety so they can relax. I have found from my lived experience and my work with clients over the last 10 years that transcendence actually arises from integration, not from bypassing our humanity. Let's explore why presence is not enough. Many teachings say just be present and suffering dissolves. But for trauma survivors and for those of us trying to navigate the complexity of the human experience, which does include suffering on a regular basis, presence can be terrifying. Let's explore why. Because the nervous system associates presence with danger. When trauma is stored in the body, or when we are chronically exposed to trauma in society, slowing down and becoming present can actually activate flashbacks, panic, grief, fear, dissociation. So the work is not just presence. The work is creating safety so presence becomes possible. This is where nervous system regulation, attachment repair, trauma healing, and titration of trauma exposure becomes essential in spiritual practices. Let's explore the sacred role of the ego. A healed ego does not disappear. Instead, it becomes flexible, compassionate, grounded, discerning, relational, and wise. A healthy ego allows us to feel emotions without being overwhelmed, to hold boundaries without guilt, to stay present without bypassing, to love without losing ourselves, and to serve without self-erasure. This is not ego death. This is ego maturation. And ego maturation is what actually allows us to have authentic spiritual embodiment. Here's my approach: spiritual integration. How do we embody our humanity and our divinity? I believe that true spiritual maturity is not escaping our humanity. It is the ability to fully inhabit it with the wisdom of our divinity. We are meant to experience both joy and grief, both peace and anger, both longing and fulfillment, both clarity and confusion. The difference is when we feel the darker emotions, we use them as information and we respond with divine wisdom rather than reacting in fear. This full emotional spectrum is part of the human experience, and it helps us make change when we see injustice, when we see people who are not in integrity. Spiritual awakening does not mean erasing our emotions. It is deepening our capacity to hold them with compassion and wisdom. Here's the new paradigm. I believe the future of spirituality is not transcending the ego or bypassing emotion or escaping the body. I believe it is psychological integration. It is nervous system healing. It is parts work. It is spiritual wisdom, and it is ethical compassion. This is what I believe true awakening looks like. It is becoming fully human while remembering our divine nature. And if this resonates, I'd love for you to like, subscribe, comment, or share with someone who might need this message. And if you want deeper teachings on trauma-informed spirituality, nervous system healing, and embodied awakening, you might explore my book, The Divine Within: Healing Ourselves to Heal the World, or join my newsletter to learn more about my upcoming courses and offerings. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being fully human while remembering your divinity, no matter where your level of healing is. When we walk this healing path together with courage and heart, we truly can make a difference in the world. Sending you deep love.